Hey guys, hoping all is well. So in this video we're going to be continuing our read-along of the Secret Zoo, Traps and Specters. And in our last video we ended at Chapter 8, so we'll be continuing with Chapter 9 today. And in the last video, towards the end, the scouts had come to the Koala Castle, where they met Solana and Ko, which was the female koala who was very interested in Ella, especially her pink earmuffs. And they basically were going to the Secret Koala Castle to investigate more about the Secret Zoo and its really unique and extraordinary pathways and kind of crosses between the real world Clarksville Zoo and the Secret Zoo. Okay. Chapter 9. The Secret Koala Castle. Noah followed his friends into a tunnel lined with the same stones that shaped the spiral staircase. Little more than 5 feet wide and 10 feet high, it had 10 branches, 5 on each side. A velvet curtain, each a unique color, hung at the mouth of each branch. As Noah walked, he read the metal plates above the entryways. The Lion's Lair, the Secret Metropolis, the secret Arctic Town. As he neared a tunnel marked Little Dogs of the Prairie, 4 prairie dogs charged out from beneath its orange curtain, leaving its yellow tassels dancing. They weaved through the scouts, stopping at Richie's flashy shoes to give them a curious sniff. "How's P-Dog?" Richie asked. One prairie dog looked up and yipped. Richie turned to Ella. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Beats me. I don't speak prairie dog." The prairie dogs ran circles through the crosser's legs, then disappeared back where they'd come from. Ella turned to Solana. "What the heck are they doing?" Solana shrugged. "The prairie dogs are crazy." "That explains their love for Richie." Megan stepped through an entrance marked the Secret Koala Castle, and everyone followed. As the curtain dropped down Noah's back, he squirmed into a spot along his friends, who had all abruptly stopped to gaze out at the spectacle before them. "Koala Hall," Solana said, the core of the Secret Koala Castle. Koala Hall was half the size of a football field and more than 40 feet high. A tremendous open space contained by stone walls and a ceiling of 4 stained glass domes. More stained glass windows were set in the walls, and the room seemed to bask in their color and patterns, ovals and diamonds and swirls of bright white light. Koalas were everywhere, resting on ledges, clinging to columns, and sleeping in eucalyptus trees, which stood all around. The koalas seemed to change color as they moved. The crosser stepped onto the top landing of a wide, winding stairway with rows of gold-braided balusters. Near the ground, the stairway widened, spilling into the floor like the train of a wedding gown. Solana headed down and the scouts followed, a plush carpet soft under their feet. At one point, the stairway split to allow a tall eucalyptus tree to pass through. As the scouts walked through the tree, Richie reached out and stripped off a piece of loose bark. He twirled it in his fingers and studiously looked it over. "Eucalyptus ovata," he said. Ella stared at Richie, her look of confusion bordering on concern. "Swamp gum," Richie said, as if this might explain something. "Sounds tasty," Ella said. "Does it come in sugarless?" As the scouts followed Solana off the stairway, Megan pointed to Ko and started laughing. "What's so funny?" Ella asked. "She's asleep." The koala had her legs drawn up against Ella's body, her arms draped over her shoulders, and her claws stuck into her poofy pink jacket. "You're joking, right?" Megan shook her head. "Should I get her down?" Ella thought about this, then said, "It's no big deal. I think my spine broke a few minutes ago anyway." As Solana escorted them across Koala Hall, Noah stared up at the domes and thought of 4 supernovas, stars exploding into waves of colorful light. His falling gaze happened to land on Solana, and he realized again how pretty she was. When Solana turned her head and accidentally met his stare, Noah smiled and felt the warm rush of embarrassment in his cheeks. Solana casually winked and looked away. Something struck his hip, knocking him sideways. Next to him was Ella, her hands propped on her hips, her eyebrows pulled down. "What?" Noah asked. "What's the matter?" He realized he was keeping his voice low so no one else could hear. Ella made a farting sound with her lips. "Pfft, you've got to be kidding me." As she walked into a new stream of reds and blues, she leaned toward him and whispered, "What's that? Were you flirting with her?" Noah's cheeks began to burn. "What? I wasn't. She's 3 years older than you. Not to mention she sort of lives in the ground. And she's got quills." Noah glanced around to make certain no one was hearing their conversation and said, "Two." "To what?" Noah held up a pair of fingers that turned green in a beam of light. "Two. She's 2 years older." "Well, that's too many." She pulled away and joined Megan, who was still admiring the castle. Noah shook his head. Their group reached the end of Koala Hall at a door marked Koala Crossings. As Solana pulled the handle, an iron rod shaped like a eucalyptus leaf, the rusty hinges squealed, and then 5 of them stepped out into the open air to be greeted by a loud, powerful wind. Megan's pigtails and Ella's ponytail whipped about. Ko awoke on Ella's back. They walked onto a long wooden drawbridge. Across from them, the bridge ended at an opening in the side of a mountain, and beneath them was a deep ravine. "The cliff barrier," Solana half shouted to get her voice above the sound of the wind. "It's what makes the Secret Koala Castle a unique sector." "Koala Castle surrounded by a mountain?" Noah asked. "Mountains, actually. A range. The open areas between the mountains are closed with stone walls." Solana pointed far down the cliff. "Like that." The scouts peered out to where a huge wall had been built between the peaks of 2 neighboring mountains. The top of the wall had a crenulated parapet, a walkway beside a low protective wall. Richie said, "I think all we know what's on the other side of the mountain, and it's not the bear." Noah turned to Solana. "The City of Species?" Solana nodded. Built into the mountain wall were turrets, small towers with cone-shaped roofs. Noah saw dozens. Thin poles stood on their pointed peaks, holding flags shaped like eucalyptus leaves. Battlements connected all of the turrets, reaching out across the rocky slope, weaving around rocks and occasional trees. On several of the protected walkways, people were pacing about. Dressed nothing like castle soldiers, they seemed out of place with their surroundings. Noah peered close and realized they were teenagers, not much older than Solana. "Who are they?" Noah asked. "Dissenters," Solana said. "They're posted at Koala Castle." "How many?" Richie asked. "Enough." "What are we supposed to be doing?" Ella asked. "Making sure the koalas don't fall out of the trees." Solana shook her head. "Degraff. We've stepped up our guard since last night." Noah walked farther out onto the drawbridge for a better look at Koala Castle. The castle itself wasn't all there was to this sector. He saw houses and halls of unnameable purposes. Towers arose from rocks and arched bridges joined buildings. Fountains sprang from grassy courtyards, crowded with eucalyptus trees. Flags whipped and snapped, each a flutter of unique color. Koalas were everywhere. Set in a rocky range of mountains, Koala Castle seemed a world unto itself. Solana and the other scouts headed over to Noah, Richie clinging to his cap, and Ella her earmuffs. Still speaking against the wind, Solana said, 4 drawbridges connect against Koala Castle to the cliff barrier, 1 on each side. Richie walked to the side of the drawbridge and stared down into the ravine. "It's a moat! We're standing above a giant moat!" Solana nodded. Ella asked, "What's that freaky-looking building over there?" She was pointing to a tall tower on an isolated part of the mountain. It had no walkways, and its dark windows were barred. "It's a prison." "A prison? For who? Bad koalas?" "For..." Solana seemed to search for an answer. "For others." Noah thought this more than a bit strange. Who was the secret society keeping prisoner? The Sasquatches? Until recently, they'd all been barricaded in the Darklands. Come on, Solana said as she brushed past the scouts. Let's finish crossing. The scouts followed Solana across the bridge. Above them, slender eucalyptus leaves dangled and swayed like a palm fibers on a hula skirt. They passed through a group of koalas which largely ignored them, their dark eyes focused on other things. The drawbridge ended at a turret mounted to the cliff barrier, where a doorway was covered with a velvet curtain. Along the bottom edge of the curtain, wind-blown tassels brushed fallen leaves back and forth. Following Solana, Noah pushed through with one shoulder and swept the curtain across his back, feeling the magic course through his body once again. Chapter 10. The City Streets. As the scouts stepped into the city species, the view still managed to take their breath away. Trees and buildings shared the streets. Waving limbs punched through the stone walls, and waterfalls spilled from balconies. Like a leafy canopy, branches blotted out much of the sky, their leaves flittering down in the momentary streaks of autumn color. A steady breeze moved clouds of mist. Rhinos and elephants plodded across concrete courtyards. Geckos and frogs spotted brick walls. Lemurs and tarsiers crowded the treetops. Most of the buildings housed sectors, and each had at least one doorway draped by a velvet curtain, a magical passageway to get inside. Above the curtains, colorful flags displayed sector numbers. With a glance down the street, Noah saw sectors 4, 28, 53, and 34. In the distance, Noah spotted the Secret Water Park, a sector inside a skyscraping water tower. The only way down from it was on the glass slides that wound through the streets and dumped into large fountains. Noah had once ridden one of them. He had never forgotten diving through the city on a rush of bubbling water, his body tunneling through treetops and hooking around the corners of buildings. Several blocks over from the Secret Water Park was the octagon-shaped Library of the Secret Society, its towering walls ending at a domed glass roof. A year ago, Noah had ridden Blizzard through its maze of massive bookshelves. The library was where Mr. Darby, sitting with Tank and the Descenders at Fountain Forum, had officially invited the scouts to join the Secret Society as crossers. An ostrich bumped into Ella and rustled its feathers, startling Ko. The big flightless bird poked forward in its knotty head and hissed, prompting the koala to reach across Ella's shoulder and swat its beak, sending the ostrich off in a rush. Ella glanced back at Ko. You go, girl! Ko let down her guard and settled back into position, holding onto Ella's shoulders. An unexpected voice rose up. I see Ella has made a new friend. The scouts turned to see Mr. Darby, sunlight caught in the old man's gray hair, his ponytail, his eyebrows, the poof of his bushy beard. He wore dark sunglasses, and wrinkles bloomed from the hidden corners of his eyes. As usual, he was wearing a velvet trench coat, this one orange. Mr. Darby's normal playful manner was nowhere to be found. His face was tight with tension, no doubt because of Degraff. Beside Mr. Darby was Tank, the biggest, toughest, and one of the kindest men Noah had ever known. Standing close to 7 feet, his entire body was a collection of muscles. They bulged like bendable balloons tied in knots. He had dark skin and a shiny bald head and stood with his arms crossed and the corners of his lips curled down. Like Mr. Darby, he was strictly business today. Around the two men were some of the animals assigned to the scouts' cross-training. Blizzard, a mighty polar bear with a back long and strong enough to simultaneously carry all the scouts. Little Bighorn, a rhinoceros with a bad temper and a knack for barreling through walls. Podgy, an emperor penguin who learned to fly. And Marlowe, a thumb-sized malachite kingfisher assigned to carry messages between the scouts and a few people in the secret zoo. Blizzard nudged Noah with his heavy snout, nearly knocking him over. Marlowe touched down on his shoulder and chirped. Ko leaned over and sniffed curiously at Little Bighorn. To Solana, Mr. Darby asked, How much time until the scouts must find their way home? About half an hour, I guess. Good, Mr. Darby said. Then please follow me. We need a comfortable place to discuss some things. He turned and started walking, his long trench coat dragging colorful leaves across the street. Uh-oh, Ella said as she hoisted Ko up on her back. when you start talking about comfortable places to talk, it usually means you have something uncomfortable to say. Indeed I do, Mr. Darby said. Indeed I do. And I'll stop the video there, ending chapter 10, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and when we continue the Secret Zoo Traps and Specters next, we're going to continue with chapter 11, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please take good care of yourselves, especially at this time, and be safe, and I hope you guys see you guys soon in the very next video. Bye.